Good morning, wherever you're at, go ahead and stand up and join us as we sing. I saw Satan fall like lightning, and I saw darkness run for cover. But the miracle that I just can't get over, well, my name is registered in heaven. Hey! I believe in signs and wonders, and I have resurrection power. Still the miracle that I just can't get over, well, my name is registered in heaven. My praise belongs to you forever. Hey! This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. Oh, this is my testimony. This is my testimony. Together, sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Oh, our God will finish what He started. Yes, our God will finish what He started. Yeah, this is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. Oh, this is my testimony. This is my testimony. Yeah. Oh, if I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Oh, greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. Hey. Come on. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. Oh, I'll testify. Yes, by Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is, yeah. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. Oh, I'll testify. Yes, by Jesus Christ the righteous, oh, I'm justified. Yes, this is my testimony. Oh, this is my testimony. Yeah, it's my story. This is my testimony.
Right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Nick. Thank you for tuning in with us. So glad that you're here. Hey, we have an awesome service planned for you this morning, but before we get into it, make sure you hit that share button, like, comment below. Here's the thing. We hear stories all the time about how a personal invite helped change somebody's life. And when you share this or just pull out your phone and send an old-fashioned text message to somebody and say, hey, watch church with me this morning, you never know how big of an impact that can have on somebody forever and how God is going to use that. Well, like I said, we have an awesome service planned this morning, and a little bit later, Joel is going to bring us a message that is just so relevant to where so many of us are right now. And then he's got an update for us about the fall and our plan to regather together. But before any of that happens, we're all gonna sing together. Chris and the band's gonna be here. So I want you, wherever you are, to stand up, sing out loud. I don't care if it's in your neighborhood. Let your neighbors know that it's Sunday.
Like Nick said, we're gonna keep singing together. We're gonna sing a song we haven't sang for a little bit that is all about the truth to hold on to, that God extinguishes our fear. Come on, let's sing together. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, no, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. Come on, fear doesn't have a chance. Oh, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Well, shame no longer has a place to hide, and I am not a captive to the lies. Oh, I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. No, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. Come on, sing it out. Oh, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Hey. Oh, there's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. Oh, there's resurrection power that can save. Yes, there's power in your name. There's power in your name. Oh, there's power that can break off every chain. Yes, there's power that can empty out a grave. Oh, there's resurrection power that can save. Yes, there's power in your name. There's power in your name. Sing, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Yes, my fear doesn't stand. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Yeah. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
But such a great reminder this morning that in all seasons that we encounter, that God is good. And even in a season like the one that we find ourselves in now, where things seem like a mystery, might seem like they're at their worst, we can hold on to the truth that God's goodness, His grace and His mercy are continuously being poured out over us. And as a response to that goodness that is given so freely to us, that we are compelled to give this morning. So at this time, we're going to give of our tithes and our offerings.
after meeting with some local government officials and the Arizona Department of Health Services, we have decided to move to an online-only experience for at least the next 2 weeks.
Well, hey, the second thing is we have no idea when we will meet together in this room, under this roof, but I can tell you right now that I am excited. I can't wait to celebrate with you. I'm looking forward to that. My anticipation is growing week by week, and oh my goodness, that is gonna be quite the celebration. We miss you, we've been praying for you. But today I want to share a few things with you that I think you need to know. We are gonna go live June 21st. It's gonna be Father's Day. The rumor's true. Next week, we will open the doors here in this building on a very limited basis, of course.
Praying, considering, debating as a team, we've made the really difficult decision to postpone resuming our in-person gatherings this weekend here at Mission.
I want you to know that our hopes and plans were to regather Sunday, July 12th, but now our new date for regathering is to be determined.
Well, what a way to start. Welcome to week 21. Well, there's no more cool in my pool, and it seems like a season when our team should be preparing for back to school. That's the time when I feel most alive. But it seems like the news is all so bad, and the whole world, it seems really, really sad. So I haven't had much else going on, so I decided to sit down and write this song.
I miss our moms, I miss our dads, I miss your singing, know it's bad, giving hugs and shaking hands. It's a mystery, I suppose, just how long this thing goes, but we'll have crowds that come and roll, and when we'll sleep at the dark, someday when we aren't 6 feet apart.
I actually think I'm onto something there. I don't know if you feel like I'm onto something. I've been working on that all week, by the way, and some people even think I sound just like Chris Patterson. That's what I've been told, and so I feel like that's a success. I want to thank Luke Combs for the inspiration to that song. It seems like that's what music's coming to these days. We've tried to remain patient, and we've tried to hold out hope, and we were having a little bit of fun this morning, but the reality is I want to address something really important. Most of us today, we're tired. We're tired of this season. We're tired of stay-at-home orders, aren't we? We're tired of having to stay at home. We're tired of stay-at-home orders again. And the truth is we've sort of shifted from missing our old way of life to being irritated with a new way of life. It's not that we're missing something anymore. Many of us, in fact, the survey we just did of our church, most are frustrated. You're irritated. You can't spend time with people outside your home, and some of us are irritated from too much time with those inside our home. Can I get an amen to that one? We're irritated that we can't go to the gym, and I'm irritated at the cost of my home gym after being gouged on OfferUp. Some of us are irritated by having to wear masks, and others of us are irritated when we're around other people who aren't wearing their masks. But we're tired of it. And we're tired, not just of staying at home, we're tired of social distancing. Anybody else? This was a phrase that prior to 2020 was not even in our vocabulary. You're gonna see today, it did exist, but it was not in our vocabulary. And most of us have gotten so tired of it, and the world's grown more frustrated and more irritated. We've even seen people being pushed beyond their breaking point in stores, in public, in our communities, business owners. We've seen people behaving in ways they wouldn't normally behave. Just recently, we were on a road trip, and we went to Texas to see some family, and we stopped in New Mexico at a gas station. It was at a convenience store, and I walked into the convenience store, and the rest of my family was still in the car. You know, I'm wearing my mask. I'm trying to be as careful as I can. I'm not trying to touch anybody. I'm trying to stay my social distance, but it was odd. I walked in, and there was actually a guy standing at the front door, and there was a guy at the cash register, and the guy at the front door was making sure too many people didn't come into the store, and that people were in their proper social distance. And so I got my stuff, and I got got some refuel for the road trip, and I got in line. And when I got in line, the line was pretty long, and the guy at the door is actually, I discover, is sort of the manager. He's sort of overseeing and training the guy who's at the cash register. And so he's the guy at the cash register. I felt so bad for him. He's having all sorts of trouble. He's the trainee, and it's going really, really slow. The line's pretty long, but they've got these marks on the floor, like you see a lot of places, telling people, showing them what 6 feet apart is. And there's one lady who's in line, and all she's come in for is a cup with ice. The problem is she's not wearing her mask, and she's standing in line, and some people are already irritated with her. There were a couple of comments that were made, even by the store manager, and she just stood there. And finally, she's like, I just want a cup with ice. And she walks up to the register to give her money. And the guy's like, hey, you're gonna have to wait in line like everybody else. Well, as she walked up to the register, everybody moved forward. She sort of lost her spot in line. Well, she wasn't okay with that. She comes back and she stands between the two guys, as you can imagine, that are now 6 feet apart, but she stands in between them, not wearing a mask, and a full-on yelling match breaks out in this convenience store. Finally, the one guy who wasn't yelling, who was just standing there, obviously very frustrated, he just drops all the stuff he's holding on the floor, throws up in his hands, and he's like, I'm out, I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. And we've seen this in lots of places in our community. We've seen people do that related to our country. I mean, I'm not trying to be political. The political series is behind us for now, even though the political season is ahead. Hopefully that's been helpful. But we've seen people so frustrated and wanting to check out that they're acting out in crazy ways. We've seen peaceful protests turn into riots and looting. We've seen people trying to annex parts of cities to create their own country. People are acting out in ways they never would before. And they're acting out in even more dangerous ways that are measurable, not just in the news headlines. These are the things that aren't the news headlines. I don't know if you've seen this, but alcohol sales are up 55%, and they're up 243% online. The opioid crisis, as announced by Washington, D.C. and our president last year, and even locally here in Arizona, it's not only increased beyond where people thought it could. People thought it's sort of at its apex. Opioid overdoses are going up in 30 of our 52 states, including Arizona. Domestic violence is up in our biggest cities, some 15 to 20%. In Phoenix, in March alone, the first full month of quarantine, there was an increase in 200 calls. That's 6 or 7 more calls per day for the Phoenix Police Department having to do with domestic violence. Suicide rates are up. We don't have the data on how much they're up yet, but in a recent study of people who are at risk for suicide, 45% of them said in this season they've had an even further plummet or decrease in their mental health. So the question is, what's really going on here? Is it just this frustration? Is it we all want to point a finger, we want to lash out, we want to act out? Here's what I think. I think we're experiencing the ache of isolation. The ache of isolation. Much of what we've seen is people being pushed beyond their emotional tolerance, leading them to cry out, act out, lash out, even check out on life. They're checking out on careers, relationships, marriages, families. Some are checking out on life altogether. And what's certain, in fact, what's agreed upon by all in the social science field is that this global physical health pandemic is turning into a global mental health pandemic. The highest risks in the pandemic are now, according to social scientists, not the risk of infection of the disease, but the after effects, the side effects, the emotional effects, the mental effects, those who were already dealing with pre-existing conditions, either in a relationship, some tension, or in life, some emotional hurt and pain, dealing with some habits or some hang-ups. This season has sort of multiplied and magnified the effects of those things. And here's why we're sort of being pushed beyond the brink, is because we weren't designed for isolation. We weren't designed for isolation mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. In fact, there's an eerily relevant story by Jesus. Jesus had an encounter with a very sick man who breaks quarantine in his distress. If you have a Bible, I'd love for you to find one or find on your device. I want you to turn to Mark chapter 1. And I want to tell you just a little bit of context as you're turning there. In Mark chapter 1, Jesus, at the beginning of Mark's account, which was influenced heavily by Peter, we get all these stories of Jesus healing people. And he's going from city to city, and he's actually been forced out of the synagogues because they're of the overcrowding. And he's gone from city to city, and as he gets to cities, even the overcrowding there causes him to sort of go out into more open and isolated spaces. And Jesus, as he moves from one town to the next, at one point he has an encounter, and a man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus. This guy, he has leprosy, and he comes and he kneels in front of Jesus. To which you're going, okay, Joel's a little dramatic today. Maybe it was the song. I don't know what the deal's going on. So let me try this, because I don't think we get the full picture of this. This is like a man with COVID-19 coming and kneeling in front of you without a mask, coughing on you. Are we together? Are we all in the same accord? Are you with me now? This guy coming with leprosy, which at the time was one of the worst diseases that people experienced because of the effects of it. Leprosy comes from the word lepo, which means to scale or to peel, and it's because literally chunks of skin would come off of people. In fact, in the Old Testament, Leviticus 13 and 14, if you're looking for some reading later, that maybe will put you to sleep, but in Leviticus 13 and 14, there's over 100 verses dedicated just to how to deal with people with leprosy. Now, this is an interesting note because this is before we knew anything about microbes or germs or bacteria or viruses. We knew nothing about this, and here's some scripture inspired by God. It tells us how to deal with people. Now, specifically in the midst of that, there's some instructions for those people who have leprosy. I want to look at just a couple of verses real quick. This is Leviticus 13, verse 45. Remember, this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before this encounter that Jesus has with this man of leprosy. This has become tradition. This has become the law of the land. It says those who suffer from a serious skin disease, it's in the context of talking about leprosy, must tear their clothing to make it obvious, because people would use clothing to cover up the fact that they had leprosy, and leave their hair uncombed. So they need to keep themselves unkept so people would notice them, and people would know to stay away from them, and it would be sort of a signal to other people. Then, look at this. They must cover their mouth, wear a mask, cover their mouth in some way, and when they're near people, call out, unclean, unclean, as if to say, hey, don't come near me, I'm infected, I'm dangerous, I'm somebody you don't want to be near because I'm sick. It goes on, it says, as long as the serious disease lasts, they'll be ceremonially unclean. And here's what that meant, is that they weren't allowed to associate with society. In fact, nobody wanted to be unclean, so they distanced themselves from people who didn't act according to the law. And they didn't act, and they didn't make their sacrifices, because somehow not only the disease was something that could spread, but these people's sin and their bad behavior and their uncleanliness was something that could go from one person to the next. They must, anyone who has this disease, they'll be ceremonially unclean, and they must live in isolation in their place outside the camp. They were completely excluded from Jewish society. Now, if you were to read on, it tells us, and again, for those of you who do the late night reading in Leviticus 13 and 14, here's what you're gonna discover. It was so detailed. They had to stay 100 cubits away from people if they were upwind from them. And if they were downwind, they could get within 4 cubits of somebody. So there was like even more specific and stringent requirements than we have in our day. And here's the fascinating part, it's gonna blow your mind. Do you know, I know cubits means nothing to most of you, but do you know what distance 4 cubits is? Put it in the chat right now. You can look brilliant. I know most of you are saying it at home, so let's say it together. 4 cubits equals, you got it, 6 feet. It's true. This is social distancing in the first century. That's not new. Now, this is important because people in the first century believed something differently about people who had leprosy than we believe about people who had have COVID-19. In the first century, people believed these three things. They believed people deserved it. They were being punished by God. They have done something. They have sinned in some way, and God is punishing them for their sin. So these people not only deserve it, but they also believed that these people won't survive it. They were known as the walking dead, and you don't want to get near them because they will spread it, and it can spread to you, and these people are not only dangerous, but they were a burden to society. Contact with them would render you unclean. In fact, it was illegal even to greet someone who had leprosy. This guy was relegated to the outskirts of society, void of human connection, living in isolation. Then, as he sees Jesus coming recklessly, he violates the legal requirements, which, by the way, is punishable by stoning. These are the legal requirements for him and the legal restrictions for him. He's responsible for this. And if he doesn't abide by the rules, he's actually able to be punished legally by stoning. He breaks all the rules. He doesn't identify himself as unclean. He disregards proper social distancing etiquette, which I know some of you have experienced people like that. He completely disregards it, and he's infected. And he boldly approaches Jesus as this man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. Notice what he says. He says, if you're willing, you can heal me and you can make me clean. Now, a careful examination of his request indicates his deepest pain, and it's not physical. In fact, because of modern medicine, we know a lot more about this disease, also known as Hansen's disease. Modern science has given us tremendous insight to this, and many believe that the reason that this was such a painful disease was because it was a rotting infection to the skin. Because it caused this deformity, and people in their extremities, they would lose fingers and toes. But later we discovered it's not because it was a rotting disease. It was because the disease creates numbness, and it disables the warning system, the pain warning system of the body. In fact, Dr. Paul Brand, who's one of the foremost leading medical authorities, he calls this disease a painless hell. And here's why. It's not because you can feel it. It's because the effects of it you can't feel. And this guy hasn't been able to feel for a long time. He's had no sense of feel or touch by anyone or anything for a really long time. And he comes pleading, begging Jesus, heal me and make me clean. Not take the pain away. Make me clean. This is the ache of isolation. Unclean was not just unapproachable. It was also undesirable, unacceptable, unlovable. He's plagued by the ache of physical, mental, and emotional isolation. And look at Jesus' response. Moved with compassion, Mark tells us. Moved with compassion while everyone else is thinking, well, that guy deserves it. Like, make sure we get him away. He needs to, what's he doing coming up to Jesus? I mean, this guy's in serious trouble. Everybody's thinking he deserves it. This guy is not gonna make it through this. He's not gonna survive it, and he's dangerous. Not Jesus. Jesus sees him drop right in front of him, knowing full well the law, knowing full well that he would be considered unclean by coming into contact, which, by the way, the CDC determines contact is within 6 feet of someone. By coming into contact with someone, that it would be determined that Jesus was unclean. Moved with compassion, Jesus did something that everyone around him would have considered unwise and unsafe. He breaks quarantine. He breaks this man's quarantine, and he breaks his own quarantine from this man. And I imagine maybe Peter, who is giving Mark the information that he's reporting to us, maybe Peter standing right there as Jesus is, standing in front of this guy, pulling him back, going, wait, Jesus, I can tell already you're about to do something crazy. And I know you got compassion, but do you know what's really going on here? Do you know what the law, I'm sure Peter, he's the one, and he's not worried about being politically correct. He doesn't care if the guy hears him. He's probably in full-on protection mode of Jesus. But moved with compassion, Jesus did something extraordinary. He reached out and he touched him. He reaches out and he touches the leper and he says, I am willing, he said, be healed. Now, Jesus didn't have to touch him, but Jesus delights in reaching out to those who are in distress. Jesus delights. He finds joy in reaching out to the downcast and lifting them out of their despair. And that's what happened for this man instantly. The leprosy disappeared and the man was healed. Now, Charles Spurgeon, I'm sort of a theology nerd, and I read a lot of commentaries related to the passages of scriptures that we're teaching so that I can learn and soak up history and how these things have been interpreted throughout history. And I love what Charles Spurgeon said. He said, if you or I were to touch this leper, his uncleanliness would be communicated or transferred to us. But when Jesus touches the leopard, his cleanliness is immediately communicated to this leopard. This was a display of Jesus's power. And not so side note, this is the gospel. He who knew no sin, 2 Corinthians 5, became sin so you and I could become the righteousness of God. The one who knew no sin, who was perfect in heaven, who needed nothing, he came and he sacrificed, he associated, he gave himself, he let men place their hands on him. He allowed the sin of the world to be communicated to him so that he could reach out to us and that we might take on his righteousness, his holiness, his health, his wholeness. That's the gospel. It's perfectly on display, and Jesus brilliantly, in the midst of creating mass hysteria of everybody around him because of this guy who's broken quarantine in front of him, he reaches out and he heals this man. Then Jesus, he does something really interesting. He sent him on his way with a stern warning. He says this, he says, don't tell anyone about this. Instead, go to the priest and let him examine you. And in fact, that's what you had to do because the priest was the one who determines whether people are clean or unclean. So he says, I want you to go and let the priest examine you, the fact that you are healed. And you need to take along the offering that those of you who are going to do your reading in Leviticus 13 and 14, you're going to discover there's an offering that was required in the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy. So they came and they made an offering to God, thanking God for healing them. And specifically in this instance, this man was grateful to Jesus who healed him. Now, I don't know why, but Jesus said, this is what you need to do because this is going to be the public testimony that you've been cleansed. Now, I'm reading between the lines, but I think for this guy, that wasn't enough public. That wasn't enough of a testimony. I mean, I'm going to go tell the priest, and so he's going to let me be around people, and all these people are going to have questions. But instead of doing that right away, Mark tells us, the man went and spread the word, proclaiming to everyone what had happened. Now, maybe he was just so grateful and wanted everybody to know about Jesus and had to tell everybody about Jesus, and so that's why he disregarded Jesus' instructions. Or maybe the ache of isolation, being identified with this disease and disconnected from society, compelled him to disregard Jesus' instructions because he couldn't stand any longer the social, physical, emotional, mental isolation that he had been experiencing for years. Now, here's the thing. Some of you know I won't stay here too long because this gets to be boring, and some of you know I like this stuff, but the effects of social isolation, in terms of science, the research is very clear. There's good research on this. And the effects of social isolation in the medical physical world are really plain. Obesity and fatigue and chronic pain and cardiovascular disease, even premature death are all things that accompany social isolation. This is why this is such a big deal. But there's also significant research that shows us the mental and emotional pain and difficulty and consequences that come with isolation. Loneliness, anxiety and depression, substance abuse. It's one of now the leading causes of suicidal tendencies. Now, there's sort of social isolation is sort of broken into two parts. And I don't want to get too clinical, but there's the physical reality, which all of us understand, that's living in a remote place or living alone or a health quarantine or enforced punishment, like through solitary confinement, or even as simple as a timeout that you put your kids in. And it has an impact on us. It's why it's done. But there's also not just the physical reality of social isolation, there's an internal feeling of it. And they don't always go together. Sometimes they do. The internal feeling is this lack of authentic connection, lack of being fully known, lack of being accepted. And many experience this internal feeling even before the physical reality of this season. And people experience this inward reality in a society, even though they're surrounded by people, they have this internal feeling that they're alone. You know what's interesting? What's interesting about this story is that we know this guy's issue, but we don't know his name. Isn't that interesting? We know his issue, but we don't even know his name. This guy is identified with his issue. His identity to others and likely to himself was wrapped up in his issue or his issues. And maybe he was even beginning to wonder if what they said is true, that he deserves it, that he won't make it through this. He's a danger and a burden to others because of it. Isn't it true that our issues have a way of doing the same thing? Our inadequacies and insecurities, a belief that if people really knew what was going on or what was really happening in our lives and in our hearts and our minds, we wouldn't be accepted. In fact, we would be unacceptable. We would be unwanted. And those feelings have a way of leading us into self-isolation, don't they? I mean, here's what happens. Just track with me. Isn't it true that we have issues? We all have issues. If you didn't know this, this is the message of today. You have issues, and guess what? We know it. You do. I do too. We all have issues, and if we're not careful, when those things are in hiding, when we don't share those things, when we aren't sharing those things with other people to carry the burden with us, when we're not releasing those things, when we're not reaching out to people and to a community, when we're not finding hope and healing from our hurts and our hang-ups and our habits, those issues become something that form our identity. It's how we see ourselves. The enemy uses those things to shape our view of us. And those issues that form our identity, they tend to isolate us from other people. I can only let people so close. There's only so much I can tell you about what's really going on. And what happens is this isolation leads to loneliness. Now you can look this up, but clinically, that loneliness ultimately spirals into a powerlessness. You feel like, I can't overcome this. And then you feel useless. And then many people experience meaninglessness. And that's how we get the statistics that we have. That's why people act out, lash out, check out. Now, this didn't begin with the COVID-19 season, but certainly the effects of this season have compounded it. Our social isolation in this season has led to a spiritual isolation that is having significant effect, not just on the world out there, on us, on you, on me. And we've done lots of things to try to stay connected online, but the effects are clear. In fact, the data is clear. Barna just released a nationwide study that they did. They did a lot of work to gather as much information over the last couple of months as they could, and 32% of churchgoers have disconnected altogether from their community of faith during COVID-19. Now, somebody in my position, that's terrifying. Not because of the viability of it, but because of the potential harm, the potential difficulty, the social isolation, and this spiritual isolation that is causing people to check out in all sorts of ways in their lives. And here's what you need to know. One of the enemy's key strategies to attacking us is to isolate us. This season has created the perfect environment for the enemy to do what he does best: to isolate you, to get you out by yourself, much like an animal that doesn't have the safety of the pack. And then he attacks you. It's the same way he attacked Jesus in the wilderness. It's the same way when King David's men went off to war and he was back by himself, that the enemy attacked him and led him into temptation with Bathsheba. I could go on in the scriptures, but let's talk about real life for a minute. In this season, we've had couples who've reached out to us and said, hey, we got isolated in this season and we're going through some trouble in our marriage. Can you help us? There's parents who've reached out and said, hey, my kids are really struggling in this season. I don't know what to do. Can you help us? But there's many more who haven't reached out. And while we were able to help some of those people and work with some of those people, and we have strategies and support and we have resources to help those people, many more are not even reaching out. They're just checking out. And we can't let that happen. I need your help in this. Every single one of you who's listening and watching, that's a part of this community. If you're not, your church, your faith community needs you right now. And we need you. We need all of you. We rallied, by the way, we've rallied in the last few years around this statement. We've said this: you belong here. You belong here. And this is what's been one of the most difficult things in this season is it's hard to sort of leverage this. It's like you want to say to people, hey, you belong here, but you can't really come here. And some of you are ready for the in-person gathering. You're ready to be back here again. I'm going to address that in just a minute. Others are not yet. But here's something we can all agree upon, and something that's true. Not just do you belong here, we belong together. We need to be together. We must stick together. We've rallied in this season to be the church for those in physical need inside our church and outside of our church. And now we need to rally for those in emotional and spiritual need inside our church and outside of it. Some of you, listen today, that's you. And I want you to know, we're paying attention. There's people slipping out the back door. They're checking out, not just of church, but their faith, out of family, out of necessary, life-giving, spiritual growth relationships that are necessary in the body. And I just want to say this. This is an important gathering, but a single point of regathering for worship will not solve this. So we've been working hard. We had to make a massive pivot when this season began, and we had to sort of go into isolation, and we couldn't bring people onto the campus. We had to start creating all sorts of online resources. And here's the thing, when we first thought, okay, we're just gonna go back to normal, and hopefully that'll be soon, and we thought that was June the 21st, and then we thought we'd push it back a couple of weeks, and then we thought July the 12th, and we thought, gosh, we'll do back to school, but What even is back to school? And is there back to school? And I guess there's somewhat back to school, and we're preparing for that back to school in our home, and some of you are doing the same thing. But here's what we've decided is that we need to take a menu approach. So we've been working hard the last several weeks to pivot again and to shift. And just as we offered all sorts of new online experiences, we're gonna offer a lot of opportunities for people to regather, reconnect, and re-engage in this season. That is our short-term thematic goal, and we need your help in joining in that. It is time to regather, to reconnect, and to re-engage. And we're gonna regather, reconnect, and re-engage in person and online. And there's gonna be opportunities for you to just reconnect with people, to belong, to be connected to people that you need to encourage you, to lift you up so you're not in social or spiritual isolation. But beyond that, we're gonna create even more opportunities in person and online for you to become the person God designed for you to be, for you to grow, and for you to ultimately fulfill in this season all that God has for you. And we don't want anybody to slip out the back door. So you're gonna be hearing about all sorts of new things that are gonna be rolled out this week. We have, for in-person and just belonging, we have all sorts of new interest groups, and we're gonna be doing some new events that are coming this fall. Interest groups in terms of just outdoor things that you can do and gather with other people. Be it hiking or mountain biking or praying together with other people. There will be several opportunities, a running group for you to connect with other people. We're gonna be gathering in smaller in-person gatherings outdoors to do some things like that. Also, there's gonna be online, we're gonna continue with our night of prayer and worship. And if you're somebody who's going, gosh, I don't feel comfortable yet connecting with people in person, there is a community of people, and I'll just tell you, it's an amazing community of people. You know who you are, that are there each and every week. And every time new people show up, every time somebody speaks up, specifically online in Facebook, there is an army of people who care about and reach out to and rally around and pray for and encourage. And if you're somebody who needs that each and every Tuesday night for the foreseeable future, we'll see how long that goes. We're gonna continue over the next season here to continue to gather for nights of prayer and worship. We're offering new communities, learning communities for people who want to grow and become even more of who God designed them to be. And there's a bunch of new studies that we're going to start, and they're going to unfold over the fall. There's going to be some that start this month, and then more in September, and more in October, and more in November. We have a whole plan that we're getting ready to roll out with a menu of options that you can engage in: financial studies, men's and women's studies, leadership studies, all sorts of things that can help you grow and begin to continue or regather and reconnect with other people that are trying to live out the principles of our faith in this season. And then we're also gonna offer a bunch of online resources, new online parenting resources and marriage resources this fall, because that seems to be the thing that people are asking for the most or in need of the most. And you're gonna begin to see ways that you can gather and engage with people online groups, online seminars, online content for parenting and for marriage this fall. And then there are some things that bust all of these categories, or that are involved in all of these categories. We're gonna regather, we're gonna reconnect, and we're gonna re-engage in ways that we can gather in person and online, and that are about belonging and becoming, like our community groups. This time, if you're a community group leader, we need you now to regather, to reconnect, to re-engage. Whether your group needs to meet online or in person, that's up to you. We need you to determine that. We need you to work with your group to determine that. But don't let anybody slip out the back door. If you're in a group, don't let anybody in your group. We need to go and we need to regather. We can't allow the social isolation that we've experienced to cause people to experience spiritual isolation, because that's when they're at greatest risk for the enemy. Celebrate Recovery, which has been done an amazing job online in this season. It's time for us to regather there on August the 14th. A week from Friday, we're gonna regather on campus. We're gonna start having Celebrate Recovery back on campus, much like we've done with Tribes, with our junior high and high school groups, where they're gonna be on campus, but sort of distanced in small groups, and we're gonna meet in small groups. Our team, our Celebrate Recovery team, has a plan for doing that. It's gonna regather on August the 14th. There will still be an online option for that as well. And then I know what most of you are waiting for, our adult worship service, beginning next Sunday, August the 9th. Go ahead in the chat. I know some of you, you're online, you're socially excited about this, and so you just go on your social media, go ahead and celebrate. I want you to celebrate right now. If you don't celebrate enough, we're gonna call it off. I'll just say, no, we're not actually gonna really do that. But next Sunday, I'm excited. We're actually gonna invite people to come back in the room. We're gonna do it very responsibly. It's gonna be safe. It's just gonna be adult worship to start, just so you know. Just want you to be prepared for that. But we're gonna invite people back in the room, and they're gonna be distanced in the room, and there's gonna be space. There's gonna be an RSVP system. We're gonna start with just one service for everybody who wants to come. We think there's only a limited number of people who are gonna be able to come and wanna come. If you're sick, if you're experiencing any sort of sickness, obviously we want you to stay home. If you're a high-risk population, we would rather you wait and not come back in this season. You know who you are. Many of you are taking those precautions, but for those of you who are ready and able, we would love to be able to provide an opportunity for you to be back in the room. We're gonna continue to provide our adult worship service the same as we have, both in person and online for the foreseeable future. Now, all the August offerings are gonna be online this upcoming week, as well as in the next weeks, you're gonna be able to see all of the offerings that are coming in September and October, November. There's some exciting family events that we're gonna do that are gonna be fun, and they're gonna be outdoor stuff that you can bring your family to. While other things like theaters and water parks are shut down, we're gonna do some family fun environments outside. They're gonna be a blast. You're gonna get to see people and control your own distancing if you want to from other people. All of that's gonna be rolled out over the next couple of weeks. But I wanna be clear, next Sunday, we're gonna begin in-person gatherings on August the 9th. Now, if you're a family, you're going, okay, what about my kids? When I want my kids to come back. I want them to be in the room with their small group leaders, and I just want you to know we're working towards that. We want that as well. But our team did something really creative, and I know a lot of you know about this, and this has taken a lot of work by our Next Gen team, and we are prepared for the rest of the fall to deliver boxes of curriculum. They're called activity boxes of curriculum to all of our families who aren't able to join us online or in person. So for the foreseeable future, right now, that's everybody. We want you can either come pick it up, you can reserve one, we'll deliver it to you, but we wanna get you an activity box and curriculum so that we can continue to make spiritual investments in your kids. And we're gonna be creating other opportunities for leaders to engage with kids, for us to engage as families in this season. You're gonna hear a lot more about that in the next couple of weeks. Here's what we believe. We believe that we belong together. And we need your help in reaching out to other people. We need your help in reaching out just like Jesus did to pull other people out of isolation. Now, some of you, I just wanna speak to some of you who you have gotten isolated in this season. Maybe all you're doing in this season is occasionally logging on and you're watching this message. In fact, some of you are watching this message because somebody sent it to you specifically after watching it. They thought of you. They thought, this person needs to hear this. I think they've gotten isolated and they're in danger of slipping out the back door of their faith, maybe out the back door of life. I want you to take a bold step today. If you're that person and you're sort of gotten isolated, I want you to text us. I want you to text Fall 20. It's how we're gonna get you the information you need about how to connect. It's gonna come up here right here on the screen. Text Fall 20 to 80123. Fall 20 to 80123. And when you text, someone's gonna reach out to you this week with opportunities to get you connected so that we can reach out and pull you out of isolation. Look, here's the thing. We are not gonna let you check out. We can't let anyone check out, not only of the church, of our community, but of faith or life. And we need your help. We need you to take some initiative, and we need you to help other people. I wanna conclude the story. I have a friend who texts me every year. I was a part of an intervention. He was battling with a drug addiction. And Every year on the date of that intervention, the anniversary of the intervention, he texts me, which is ironic because that day he wanted to kill me. When I sort of led this intervention of, hey, you can't stay at home anymore. You can't live here. You don't have to go into rehab, which was a 90-day inpatient program, by the way, but you can't stay here because you're not safe to your family. Honestly, you're not safe to yourself. And this is sort of tough love, but you need help, and we're trying to help you. The truth is we're many years past that, and he's continued to stay involved with other guys. In fact, he runs a nonprofit today. It's not his job. He doesn't benefit financially from it at all. He has a full-time job. But in addition to that, he runs a nonprofit, almost a full-time gig. It's in and of itself, helping other people into treatment and helping people transition out of treatment. And I asked him, I said, tell me this, come on. Why do you do this? I mean, you've more than paid back. You've more than helped other people. You've more than made up for what other people did for you. And here's what he said to me. He said, when I help others, it helps me. That's important. There's people who need your help today. And when we help others, it helps us. He said, when I reach out to other people like you did for me, here's what I know. If we make it, I make it. I continue to make it. None of us make it on our own. We belong together. It's the way God designed the body of Christ. We need one another. Here's how the story finishes. This is so encouraging. Don't miss this. It goes on, it says, the man went and spread the word, proclaiming to everyone what had happened. And here's the result. Large crowds soon surrounded Jesus, and he couldn't publicly enter a town anywhere. He had to stay out, look at this, in secluded places. But people from everywhere kept coming to him. Here's the good news today. If you feel like you're isolated and out in a secluded place, that's where Jesus hangs out too. He's out there. He's with you, and he's reaching out to you, and so are we. No matter what your battle, no matter what the name of your issue, there is one name that stands alone above every other name, and one day, every name will bow. Every name, every tongue will bow, and they will confess supreme rule, supreme honor, and supreme glory, supreme power to one name that's above every other name. Maybe today is your day to reach out. Maybe today is your day to be pulled out. Maybe today is the day you refuse to act out and lash out and check out, but to reach out and allow Jesus to rescue you in your distress. Let me pray for you. God, I pray for somebody today who's in distress. I pray for people that I know today in distress and isolation. I pray for people who know others who are in distress and in difficulty. I pray that we would do what the body does, that we would be the church in the same way we're being the church to meet physical needs of people in our church and in our community through Helper. God, I pray in just as an extraordinary way, you would compel us, you would move us to reach out to people who are in emotional and mental distress in their social isolation. Even though we've started to be around people again, many feel completely alone and hiding and isolated. God, I pray for somebody today, they would be released. They would be uninhibited. They would choose to break spiritual, emotional, mental quarantine today, and that they would reach out, that they would come and seek out a Savior who's represented by a body of people who are his representation, the church, and that they would find their way out of the loneliness, the despair, and the difficulty of hiding and being in the dark. and that today would be the day that some would be lifted up. We give you all the praise for it today because you're the only one who can do it. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Let praise be a weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We'll sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. We'll sing with all we are. We claim your victory. Yeah. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We praise you. We praise you. Let faith be a song that overcomes the raging sea. Let faith be a song that claims the storm inside of me. Yes, let it rise. Oh, let faith arise. Let it rise, yeah. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. You cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We praise you. We praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you. We praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you. We praise you. Oh, this is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you. We praise you. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. You cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, God, we praise you.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I first want to just remind you that next week we're going to gather in the room. For those of you who are ready, you're going to see all the precautions and the opportunity to RSVP. That will be live tomorrow online. Check our social media channels. Check your inbox for email. But for today, some of you need to reach out. And I just want to remind you again, if you haven't done it yet, you can reach out to Fall 20 at 80123. Text the word Fall 20. It's right up here on the screen to 80123. And we would love to help you get connected. We'd love to send you some personal information to help you get connected. Next week, we begin a brand new series, whether you're gonna be here in person or online. We have a brand new series called Heaven, Hell, and Everything in It. I'm really excited. I know that sounds like a lot. I don't know how long the series is gonna go. There's plenty of content. We kick it off next week. It's a fantastic opportunity to invite anybody to connect, to engage, or to reconnect and re-engage. I hope you'll join us for it next week. Heaven, Hell, and Everything in It. Until then, you have a great and a safe week, and we'll see you next Sunday.